everybody should get a therapist before they need one, because the therapist will recognize when something is shifting and tell you. It is their job. And I didn't have a context for how important that was, and now I do.
Hey everyone. Today I have the pleasure of talking with a dear old friend, Aldric Giacomoni. Hey Aldric, how you doing?
Hey Debbie, I'm fine. How are you?
Good. I'm really excited to have you here on Scaling Tech. Appreciate you taking some time. We're talking about a really interesting topic today, and that's burnout, and specifically your experience with it, and which is very brave of you to talk about. So really looking forward to hearing the journey that you went through. First, I want to just, for those that don't even know you, do a little introduction. So Aldric and I used to work together about 10 plus, I can't believe it's been 10 plus
15 years ago.
In addition, Aldric's been a member of the New York tech scene for over 15 years. He's a dedicated practitioner of XP and has been for quite some time. He enjoys the game of Go, playing and composing for the piano and studying martial arts. And you are fascinated by the potential LLMs is presenting for society, and you've recently joined an early stage startup called Sublayer. And Sublayer has the modest aim of transforming what we think of software development.
Very modest aim, yeah.
Very modest. Really excited to see how Sublayer develops, because looks like a very fascinating company. I'm glad that you're part of it. So I reached out to you because I saw something that you had written and did a video on talking about your own burnout. And you had shared that for about 4 years ago, you started to burn out, but you only realized it 8 months ago.
Yeah.
2 months after you quit your job.
Yep.
And then it took you 9 months to recover. So, Oh my gosh. Right. And so I want to start with all right, so how did you realize it? Cause you kind of suffered from burnout for over 3 years before realizing that's what it was. And so what was that light bulb moment where you realized, I think what I'm going through is actually burnout?
Yeah, so just one thing for scale is that the burnout got progressively worse over the 3 years. It's not like I was at rock bottom 3 years ago and then just kind of survived that rock bottom. But that essentially sort of steps started to happen where I just wasn't recovering emotionally and intellectually from, what I was going through. And eventually it just got too much. To answer your question, I realized it because I quit my job in October, and then my parents were very understanding and very kind about not hounding me with questions about where's the next job, what are you doing, are you going to live under a bridge? And then I thought, I'd have another job 6 weeks after without a problem, and then Thanksgiving came around and I wasn't looking for jobs. I thought, it's fine, I can take a slightly longer break. And then Christmas came around, and then New Year's Eve came around, and I was at my parents' house for Christmas and New Year's. And then at dinner one evening, my dad asked me, I can't remember what question, but a very sort of innocent question about work. I think maybe about the company I had left or whatever. And I got agitated. I didn't really start yelling, but compared to what the conversation was before the question and after the question, I essentially bit his head off. And that's when I realized I had an outsized emotional response to a question that was not particularly emotionally charged. And that made me realize, this is probably burnout.
That's so interesting, because I think when I speak with folks on Scaling Tech, I try to think about one or two things where people can really kind of take away something from someone else's experience, because that's what this is all about, connecting other tech leaders. And so we can learn from others. And I think that's such an interesting thing to file away. If my reaction doesn't fit the conversation, is there something more going on with me that maybe even I don't realize?
Yeah, that was the point when I started to really think about it. And I spent essentially the first 2 or 3 weeks of January really exploring the theory, essentially going, am I sort of hurt at that point where it's a problem for me to like, is there a part of myself that I'm afraid to touch, right? And I realized through the 3 weeks of January, like I'm afraid to think about work. I'm afraid to try and look for another job. I'm afraid to sort of get back into those waters.
Now, before you identified this journey as burnout, and you said it came on gradually over time.
Yeah.
So two things. So what were there, like, milestones along the path to the bottom? And the second thing was, like, did you misclassify it, at first? So those are kind of related. Like, were there, like, 3 months in, where you're like, oh, I think maybe I'm not eating right, or maybe I'm not sleeping enough, or maybe
Right.
did you, like, what were the milestones and what were the misdiagnoses that you kind of went through?
So the biggest misdiagnosis, and this is one of the parts where, like, my story is not necessarily a good match for other people, but they may find something that is important for them, is I worked at a startup that was fairly successful and went through hypergrowth before COVID, and I got a management position there. So, like, I went from being a consultant for a number of years to being an in-house software developer, and then I took a management position there. And management, as I think most of us imagine or know, is very, very different from software work in a number of respects. And so I had to make a lot of adjustments to how my brain works, how my brain expects context, how it expects information, how it processes things, what it means for me to provide value in a company, because conversations that I could have for a number of hours in software, which were actually valuable conversations, it would be silly for me to have the same type of conversation in my position, because now there's software developers whose job it is to do this. And so this was hard for a number of reasons. One of them is, as the company went through the hypergrowth and did so successfully, it also accumulated all of this organizational debt, as opposed to tech debt, for instance. And so the first couple of months with the other directors were tricky, because we had to really go look at all the teams, all the individuals, figure out, is there someone who shouldn't be here? Is there someone who's, like, not a good fit for the company? Or, like, do we have to change of how the company internally is organized? Do we have to change relationships? That was tricky, but really the hardest part was, for the first time in my life, I actually was sort of responsible for a lot more context than I ever really had to be responsible for before. So I had to accept that instead of doing work, in the XP way of, like, I'll take a feature and I'll pair program on it with somebody else and be done with it in a couple hours, or maybe a couple days if it's a really big feature and sort of screwed up, where there were more unknowns. I suddenly was working on plans that were 3, 4, 5, 6 months or more in the making, that had to be essentially just checked in on, and then I had to delegate a lot of that and make sure I got the right information, but not too much, not getting people's ways and so forth. So I had to learn how to do all of this. And this put a bunch of stress, which is normal, because I had to sort of change what I was used to, right? And so that was kind of the first misdiagnosis, was there's a normally large amount of stress that I'm undergoing. And I was under this assumption that I was just going to recover from it as that went, because I would get used to it and so forth. Whether this is a reasonable assumption to make, I can't tell you, because I have only lived my life so far. But I should have been more careful. And again, this was my dad was actually very useful once when I was talking to him about this a couple months in. And at some point, I just described to him what I was doing, and then I told him, I'm tired. I don't have a lot of energy. And he said, you're working 60-hour weeks. And I went, no, I'm not. And then I counted, and I went, oh, yeah, I am. And I've been doing that for like 3 months now. Yeah. Okay. This is more than I was used to.
Right.
So there's a lot of ways in which sort of I let life slide a bit, and then didn't realize how it slid. And I think that's That's one of the important, difficult lessons for me. Is a lot of this was a very slippery slope, where it was tiny additional steps that are in and of themselves aren't bad, but allow other tiny additional steps.
Right. I think like two of the things that I picked up on when you were just talking about the story was, number one, just sometimes having a conversation with someone that knows you, even if you're not asking for them to reflect, they do reflect.
But they'll notice, yeah.
They'll notice, right? So
Right.
just talk to someone that knows you, and I've seen that in my own life and people around me. You seem different. You seem more tired. You seem more annoyed.
Yeah.
You seem like you have a shorter fuse than the last 10 years, 20 years that I've known you. And I think that's really important, to just have conversations, meaningful conversations with people that really know you, so they can reflect, whether you ask them to or not. But even specifically asking for them, like, hey, do I seem like more stressed than when I usually get stressed? Or,
Yeah.
because I feel something's different. I can't put a finger on it. And the other thing that I really picked up on is this idea of it's easy to miss your inability to recover.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? Because the act of like stress, we all have stress. The act of working a long week, we've all done that.
Mm-hmm.
We're all,
Yep.
we're get control. Sometimes we need to put in some extra hours. Sometimes we need to get stressed, or we are in a stressful situation. But it's that inability to recover to like your baseline state that I think is kind of like a sign for like, is it more than just stress, which is not great, but is it dipping into burnout or unhealthy long-term territory?
Yeah, and you're right. It was very difficult, and it made me realize, actually, I'm trying to remember his name. I think it might have been Adam, when I worked at Stride, 2014, I think it was. We were at a client together, and he said, everybody should get a therapist before they need one, because the therapist will recognize when something is shifting and tell you. It is their job. And I didn't have a context for how important that was, and now I do. So,
that is such good advice. And really, I mean, whether it is a professional or a close friend, someone that really can see those differences, see those trends. And obviously, I know many people in my life that have said exactly that. Like, the therapist is extremely valuable because they know them and because they've worked with them for so much time. And then this thing happened that they themselves didn't even see. Yeah, wow, I really love that. It makes me want to actually go get a therapist right now, because it's just having someone to talk to, and you don't have to be in acute crisis, right? In order to really get someone who's trained in really having conversation.
Yeah, as you said, someone who's going to be a mirror for you. Yeah.
Yes. I love it when, I bet you if you or I talked to Adam today, he himself wouldn't realize how valuable that piece of advice was for you.
Well, it would be, it was valuable and I missed it, right? Now I understand it.
Now it's right. But now it's valuable.
If I could go back, I would definitely get a therapist like 8 years ago.
But now everyone listening to this, really, like, we've kind of now amplified this message, and
hopefully,
now it's even more valuable, because it's not just you and I, it's everyone listening can really take this advice.
And I can share, the missed lesson from not following the advice, right? This is what happened.
Exactly. So I know I couldn't agree more, and so I'm glad that at least you can look back on it and reflect. So that's great. Now, one thing, I've known, hundreds, if not thousands of technologists over my career. And this idea of having a full-time job, plus all of the things that you need to do in your day-to-day life, plus, finding the space to mentally focus on something big like burnout, like, often those things are very, very challenging. And I do know many software engineers, technology leaders who have found that not having a job for a while really opens up that space to focus on yourself.
Yeah.
And so did you find that that was a key aspect for you? Like, I know it's hard to say like, oh, could you have done this with a job? Would the outcomes have been the same? But do you think, like, if you had to do it over again, do you think that was a key factor in like that like October through January period?
One thing that, like one truism that we all know is, we take our work home with us, right?
Especially now.
Now it's
when
physically
home
true.
is work.
Yeah, it used to just mean, what you keep thinking about your work, and now it might actually mean, you're here at the dinner table going, I need to just read this email, hang on, right?
Right.
You're on Slack going, it's like, well, I'm trying to help you do your homework, but let me just answer this Slack. It's like, no, just, right? And so when I was in my mid-20s, I was much more heavily into martial arts, and I did a couple of things that I had practices like meditation, things that I would do regularly, and things that I let go of progressively because I could not see really what they were doing for me. And then again, thinking back, looking at the openings, no longer having to take my work home with me because my brain was open to just itself, just healing itself, taking its own time. As I was able to get back into this, because most of my time for a very long time was basically playing video games, right? I really just couldn't do anything more useful than that. What I would describe now as the ability, as a reason to do meditation or some version of this, is that your mind, I hate not to use another truism here, but your mind is a muscle essentially. And so what you have to teach it to relax, because just like you can get pains in your body because your muscles aren't relaxing, right? Like you end up being hunched in a position because you're just tensed in that position forever, and you need a massage therapist to work you through it. But the massage therapist can temporarily relieve the pain. If you don't make a change in your life for how you got there, it's gonna come back. You're going to re-hunch. And meditation helps you do that, right? You're not going to stop taking your work home with you, especially if you're doing in software, because all this is thought work. But you can give yourself a structure, give yourself rituals, little patterns that you follow to help create a barrier in your mind and say, okay, it's time to let go of these things for the rest of the day, or for a couple hours at least, and then allow your mind to go do other things.
Yeah, and I like how you said that you had these martial arts habits and rituals, and you slowly kind of let them go over time without that kind of anchor of okay, what's the long-term benefit of these practices?
Yeah.
And whether it was a conscious thought or not, like it just kind of happened over time. And I actually find for myself that I'm unable to stop my brain from having unproductive thoughts, but I am able to stop the unproductive thoughts if I force myself to do something where my brain must focus on something else, like manual work, like gardening or exercise or something where like I'm forced to, like, okay, if I'm skiing down a mountain, I really have to focus on skiing because or else I'm going to get hurt at my age. So I really have to pay attention to what I'm doing. And then an hour later, you pleasantly realize that your mind is in a good place, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, I kind of have taken to, like, what's the thing that I'm going to do to really kind of fill that space in my head? And that seems to work for me really good.
Yeah, it is another path which I think will at least keep you going. I am not an expert in how the mind works, so I can't really compare and contrast the techniques. But so meditation is the only thing I have any experience with. And I don't know if you remember, but during maybe the first Stride open space, or maybe the second one, you had brought in as a keynote speaker someone who actually did a meditation exercise for everybody. And the the one metaphor he had used that I really liked was when your brain is working, it has this kind of top 50 of of the best thoughts, and kind of it's playing those thoughts all the time, over and over, right? And so what you kind of have to do is let those play out. Like find a way to have your mind let go of these things. But you have to realize that once it's let go of the top 50 thoughts, there's another CD underneath as the next top 50 thoughts, right? Like it's not like the one CD is done. There's a whole stack of them.
It is interesting that you mentioned that, because sadly I don't remember the person who said that, but I 100% remember that. And I actually will use that technique to this day. And I'm constantly fascinated about that next playlist. When I can get my brain to the point where the top 50 tracks or whatever tracks are in their place, all these new things come flooding through, and I'm like, wow, where
did this come from?
And I always think back to that comment. It's so true.
It was a powerful image.
Amazing. It really, really, really is. It's funny that both of us remember that so long ago. So long ago. So as you took this journey of the 9 months to unburn out, right? So you identified it, you kind of allowed yourself some quiet space, physically and mentally, and then you gave yourself, you did say this, but I kind of heard you imply this, that you gave yourself permission to be like, all right, all I'm going to do is play video games. That's all I can do, and that's okay. Whether it was okay or not, that was what you could do for a while, right?
Yeah.
And so were there any other key moments? You talked about some of the key moments on the way down.
Right.
Okay, so Forrest is like, take some time, do some stuff. Doesn't matter what stuff it is, do some stuff. And then what other key moments, were there any, like one or two key things on the way up where you kind of helped heal from the burnout over the 9 month period?
I can tell you sort of steps I noticed, which isn't necessarily things that I did to get better, but moments when I realized I was done with a layer, done with a step.
Okay.
So like first, speaking of misdiagnosing, this was really more lying to myself, but we can label it as maybe kindly for myself later. When I quit the job in October, I was also the timing worked out okay, because there was a game that came out on PlayStation 5 shortly after. It was a very big kind of engrossing storyline, and I'm a sucker for good stories. Like had good myth, good folklore, good world building. So I just played that and really enjoyed it. And then another, like, rarely you have so many games coming out that do this, but another one came out 4 weeks later. So I was like, oh, great, I'll just do this one. So I had sort of reasons to be into video games, to kind of follow these things, and get lost into these other worlds, right? Like get an escape in my life, if you will.
Right.
And the first step that made me think maybe I'm kind of done with this step was I have a side project that I put together actually when I became a manager, and I had to start keeping track of all these flows of context, where I implemented the Getting Things Done framework as an Emacs Lisp package. And so I dropped that for like a year and a half or so. And then I spent about 3 weeks of like 5-6 hour days looking at it and implementing it and reworking it and making improvements to it. And this was... It was a safe haven still, because it's my code, it's my thing. I have like 4 people who use it. So it was a kind of a safe time to say, can I think about code again? Can I think about processes again? Can I like make things better? Can I write tests? And that was nice. And when all of that sort of energy and effort was done, I tried to go back to video games and went, I want to do something else. I don't want to do this anymore. Like I'll spend like an hour a day on this maybe at most, but I'm basically done with this. And that made me realize, okay, this is, my brain is moving on to something else. Now, it was 3 months between that and the time when I said, hey, what I have is workout clothes that I haven't like put on. What if I like try to do crunches and push-ups, right? And that was like another really big step where I went, hey, I have a body, like I should do something with it. How about I take care of myself? In between that, another big step that came up was I looked at my apartment and then I went, I should clean this. It wasn't like slobby, filthy, but it was, they were clothes that I hadn't folded in a month and a half. There was, like dust collecting that I had like willfully ignored in like key dusty places. And then, the kitchen was kind of this like weird mess of like stuff I hadn't thrown away. And so I just, I went on YouTube and I downloaded like playlists of someone who like does podcast style things on esoteric topics, which I find interesting. And then I just put that in my ears and started to clean. And I'm not going to pretend I enjoyed it, but I was able to think about it. I was able to sort of assess it, and I was able to go through the work and do it. And, and I was able to maintain this for like 2 or 3 months. And that made me think, okay, this wasn't like a one-off, I should clean my apartment. Okay, great. Back to being a slob, right? It was really sort of another step in the direction of becoming a self-maintaining human being, right? So that was good. And then when I started to work out again, it was this other, okay, I'm kind of maintaining myself now. I'm putting in the steps to maintain who I am. And that's also when I realized, oh, I can go on LinkedIn now. I can look out for job descriptions, look out for applications, like try to wake up my network and see what jobs out there will be interesting. So that's kind of roughly the steps.
Well, it's so fascinating because what you're describing, you could totally kind of zoom out and kind of categorize as you emerged from your state of being burnt out. First, you were able to do things that you enjoyed, and then you expanded into doing things that you enjoyed and also scared you a little.
Yeah.
And then you expanded onto like the stuff that no one likes to do, like cleaning, like
right.
What are the necessary things that you kind of got to do. And so, and I do really think that is a very powerful way to look at like a repeatable process, right? For coming out of burnout, right? Like, can I do this thing that I want to do? Yes. Okay. Can I do this thing that I don't want to do, but I know I should do?
Right.
Yep. And I feel like those are like, like really powerful steps and questions that people can ask themselves, because I think it's very hard when you are in a state where you are truly burnt out. You looked at that pile of clothes.
Yep.
They didn't just come out of nowhere. They were there the day before. And and you just couldn't do it. You just couldn't do it. And then one day you could do it. You're like, all right, I'm ready. Let's go. Let's tackle it. Tackle this thing, this chore, this, adult duty that I have to do.
That's exactly what happened. And
yeah.
It happened. Even that happened in steps, right? Because I had 2 years before that, I had kind of categorized my clothes into like 2 groups of like this, and I was like, this is stuff I need to sort out and maybe throw away. This is the stuff I need to I want to keep wearing. And then I had for like a long time. So this was, we're in the burnout period already, but I didn't know it. I had this folded pile in the corner of my bedroom of clothes that I wanted to sort through and maybe throw away. I just didn't do anything with it. And so it was just there for 2 years. It was 2 years. And which is, like COVID years, but still.
Now is that pile still there?
No, it's gone. That's one thing.
Right.
Is like I was able to, once I folded the clothing, I said, okay, well, this is all clothing that I do want to wear. And then I went back into my room to actually put it away, and I looked at the clothing and went, okay, let me get a garbage bag now, and then I'll just put stuff in the garbage bag I'm not going to wear again, and then we'll go from there. Right?
It is.
And once it was in the garbage bag, it was a really easy decision to make.
It's not a complex task necessarily, yet and still you weren't in the state where you could get it done, right? And now you are, and so I know we're coming up on time, but I really appreciate your vulnerability, your honesty. I really do. Like every time you were kind of describing your story, I was like very instantly like just hearing these key repeatable lessons that I could use in my life that I know other people listening can definitely use. So really appreciate
Good. I'm
you
glad.
taking time to chat with me today. It was a pleasure to see you.
Yeah,
Glad to
of
hear that
course.
you're doing well. And thank you everyone for listening.
It's a pleasure
Bye.
to see you too. Thank you for having me. Bye.